Hello, friends, and welcome to Born to Be All of Me, the podcast. I am your host, Amber Sousa, and I am delighted to be with the amazing, multifaceted, multi-talented Brianna Brown Keen. Thank you for being here with me today, Brianna. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Amber.
Oh, yay. So you are, when I say multifaceted, you are an actress and a singer and an author and a speaker and a podcast host and a philanthropist. You really are a fully expressed woman, right? Like this podcast is born to be all of me. And when I think of you, you are a woman who really is embodying all of who you were born to be. And it feels like every time you get a new calling that's a part of you being all of who you were born to be, you're like, yep, okay, we're doing it.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Oh, so I want to go back. I was listening to your podcast. You started your own podcast, Manifesting Your Mission. And I was listening to the first episode, and you were sharing about an experience that you had when you were 14.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And the reason why I want to go back to that is because you had a profound experience where something that was really, really challenging woke you up to the fact that you were here for something greater.
Yeah.
Even in the middle of what could be seen as a devastating experience, a traumatic experience. And I had a similar experience. I went to rehab for drug addiction when I was 19 years old. And at around the same time, my aunt had a numerology reading done for me. And I remember listening to this tape. It was a tape. And she said that I was here to be of service to the masses. And I remember being in a place in my life where I was very far from that, right? Like very far, but it spoke to my soul. And I just knew that I was here for more and that I had a big purpose. So I would love to hear a little bit about what led to that experience for you and how that has helped fuel you in living and manifesting your mission.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just dive right in. Um, yeah, no, I think like so many of us, we have different experiences that if we choose to look back with gratitude from what we learned and how we grew, bigger than our problems, as Tony Robbins likes to say, that it's all about growing bigger than our problems, that it's actually was such a blessing, right? So when I was younger, I was a little socially awkward, had acne, did not come from money. Like I was kind of an easier target for like mean girls, right? And then there were just rumors about my sexuality, and there were rumors about things that I had done and hadn't done. With the irony is I hadn't done anything. And also you need to think back. This is at a very different time. This is 30 years ago. This is in the suburbs of Minnesota. I mean, back then I have friends who were beaten up for, being just accused of being gay. Right. So it was a very, very different time. And while I wasn't gay, just being anything, whether it be, promiscuous or any of that, like it's so kind of polar opposite now where everything's
Mhm.
celebrated and almost encouraged.
Right.
Whereas then it was absolutely not. And at 14 finding my sensuality and just growing up, and honestly, I wasn't doing anything. I was then being targeted as that was the thing that was wrong with me. I think they were just trying to find something to make fun of me for. But it ended up leading to groups of friends no longer being friends with me, being ostracized on my soccer team, feeling like people would look at me in the hallways. Now, whether or not that was true or not, that was the story that I had, right, when I was in middle school. Boyfriends being bullied for dating me. I say boyfriends with like air quotes,
I have a daughter in middle school. I get it.
it was real air quotes, boyfriend. The like paper, like, will you go out with me? And they're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yes. And then we'll talk about trees or something.
Yeah.
But it's very innocent, a lot more innocent than it is now. And to the point where my best friend, whose father ironically was a judge, told her to not be friends with me so she wouldn't get bullied. So there was vandalism done to my house. It was really, really severe. My parents wanted me to move away or move away from school and find another school. And I, for whatever reason, was dead set that I needed to be on their soccer team. So, okay, that was the thing. And so I stayed in, and it got worse and worse and worse as I actually entered high school, to the point where I became suicidal. And there had been a couple different attempts, but they never were severe enough to like hospitalize me, which is a weird thing if you've never experienced that. You have to be like, it almost was like I need to have a knife hanging out of me. And they're like, okay, now I believe that you're gonna try and kill
I
yourself.
know. It's crazy.
Um, I was also on medication at the time that I'd been given that in retrospect they found out, which is actually very common, that that the SSRI caused suicidal tendencies in adolescents. So you do have to be very careful putting your adolescents on any sort of SSRI, because that is more common than people are even aware of. So, but this one in particular was the case. We didn't know that then. So I'm sure it was like a multitude of issues, not having tools of how to handle it, and then being hospitalized. And, it was a real dark moment of the soul where I was in the hospital wanting to die, banging my head on the ground, just being like, I can't do this anymore. And when you're young and you don't have any tools to be able to have perspective of like life, everything seems like so insurmountable. But I do think that's relatable just for all of us when we're in our darkness, and we're not seeing that there is light out on the other side of it, that I felt like I wanted to die again. I was banging my head on the ground, because they could take away everything that you could possibly use to kill yourself in the hospital. And I had a real God moment. So I remember feeling like white light come through me, and I suddenly felt peace. And I had a knowing that my life had a purpose. And that moment really shifted me. So when I went back to school, I called out all the people who I found out had been like, who'd vandalized my house. I went to different classes and explained what had happened to me, because then there were all these weird rumors about what had happened to me. And I became a total overachiever. And I also just no longer felt the need to like fit into, I want to sit with the popular crowd or whatever that nonsense was. I was like, I'm doing me. And that's to say that, oh, and then everything was easy, because it wasn't. But I then took bold steps. Like having been in middle school, I tried out for the plays and I didn't make them, right? Like I couldn't sing beyond the page, like so I was too scared. And then after all of this, I had a student teacher encourage me to like try out for the musical, the high school musical. And I was advanced in choir and everything. And so I did. And I was one of the few freshmen that made it. And they had like a really good theater program. And like that opened up that whole part of me that I had been so stage fright, which is so ironic because, that's what I ended up doing for a living.
Yeah.
And again, this is coming at a time when this is, pre-YouTube, people did not just, get discovered anywhere like now. There weren't multiple regions where things were filming like there are now. It was Los Angeles. You had to be in Los Angeles. And
Right.
so at 19, through multiple things, I found representation in Minneapolis. I got with the best representation in Minneapolis, and then I came
Yeah,
out.
because didn't you just start cold calling when
Yeah,
you were 14
yeah,
from the yellow pages
yeah.
agencies? You were like, this is what I'm gonna do. This is like
Know if I really like, I
sorry.
don't think I fully was like, and I see it clearly. It was
Yeah.
like a weird drive, and I ended up just being bold. And I had the yellow pages, and I just started cold calling, the Minneapolis agencies, the talent agencies, and just asking like, how do I be an actress? And then just finding out information. And then one of the ladies thought she saw because I learned you have to submit your headshot and your resume at a certain time, and you do it like every 6 months. And so I just like, okay, then every 6 months I'll just to submit my resume until I get up to the better agency. And I did all of that. And she flipped my headshot over, and she saw that I went to a school that had a good theater program, right? And so she's like, let me bring her in. And then the fact that she brought me in and I was willing to come on like a day off from school, she saw that like, wow, this person has follow through. She's like taking initiative. And then I started auditioning by videotape. VHS, yes, VHS. Uh, there in Minneapolis for some big movies, for different television shows, and I started getting callbacks, which again, like so different than it is now, but that was like a really huge deal. And then I was ended up brought out for a feature film that was with Chevy Chase that I tested for, which is crazy. And then I was brought to Los Angeles, and I started I had like a I was auditioning for pilots and movies, and I ended up getting like a family film and a commercial. And I was the first line in Freaks and Geeks, which got me SAG. And that was all then. And then I had to kind of deal with like, oh my God, I don't really know how any of this works. I just kind of knew if I didn't try, I would regret it. Right. So that we have to fast forward a few years. But in college, I knew if I don't try this thing in Los Angeles, I came out for a couple months for a pilot season, and then all of this stuff had happened, and it was in a very incubated, like sheltered way. And then when I actually moved to Los Angeles, it was like, and welcome to adulting, like hard
Oh
knocks,
man.
like living with crazy people. How do I even make a living? And my parents, while they loved me, they were very much, they knew they had to support me because they knew my personality, but they also didn't want to support me. So it was a definite sink or swim. So I had a lot of learning in that first decade of
Wow.
and truthfully not trained. That's the other thing. I wasn't like going to conservatory. My parents weren't willing to pay for that. My parents weren't like putting me in like every summer camp with professional actors who teach you. I wasn't in any of that. So I
Right.
had to, through sheer grit, tenacity, and being like, I guess I'm going to piecemeal how to make up my own conservatory in Los Angeles with conflicting ideas and crazy acting teachers and whatever, like, and navigate it because I then was too stubborn to go home. you know,
Right. Yeah.
I I look back and I had a grandmother who I love, but I think her like trying to manipulate me to come home because I was the only one who left the nest,
Hmm.
actually gave me more reason of like, oh, I'm never coming home. Like
Right.
you don't get to do like that's just not even an option now. Like
This will work. Yes.
but
This
I
will work.
because I'd had success and or not, not huge success, but because I'd booked, because I'd had, close encounters, I was like, oh, I know I can. So then
Right.
what can I do? What do I need to do to get better? And I do think that tenacity, whether it was, starting on the C team in soccer and then being like, well, let me just get my skills better. And then suddenly I'm A team and starting. Like I just always knew if I just work really, really hard and then learn how to work smart and not hard, stupid hard, right? Like, and
Right.
be effective, that then I can get to what I want to get to. And that eventually led to later in Los Angeles wanting to create more community because it felt very, it felt like a heightened version of high school. Like you're competing against all these women that are a version of you, or not a version of you, but like, everyone's competing. And
Yeah.
many of the guys, they had ulterior motives of wanting to be your friend. And, some were grown men that, you could be like, hi, dad, or grandpa. And, that was so different from being in Minnesota. So I knew I needed to create community. I knew that I needed to create something to help support me. And it originally started with facilitating artist way groups with my manager's clients, and then with friends. And I was like, well, if I do Julia Cameron's artist way, it'll help me like unblock. And, I was just like throwing darts at the wall, being like, what do I do? How do I move forward? And then it eventually led to me forming a goal group, like basically a mastermind goal group with a handful of people that I had met. And then I expanded it. And then I realized I wanted it to be less about just me, and having a philanthropic aspect. And so that birthed what became the New Hollywood, a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. And we've done different charitable events, everything from like helping stop human trafficking to environment to, where our main program right now is helping formerly homeless single moms with grant schools and mentorship. So, with all of that, I ended up writing a book based on the format, but I've had that group for almost 20 years, right? I've been a professional actress for like 25 years.
Yeah.
So everything that I've done, well, you said like I have so many irons in the fire, and yet I've done all of them like slowly over time, right?
And would you say, because it sounds like they've each been born out of like you creating as a visionary what you were needing.
Yeah.
right? Like you came out here alone. You had a dream, you had a vision for yourself. You felt, I mean, you were out here at 19 years old from Minnesota. LA is very different. And
Very.
so you decided that you needed community. And so you created it yourself.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about grit, because I've heard you talk about that. And I love that word. Do
Yeah.
you think that's something that we're born with? Do you think that's something that can be developed? Um, because you definitely have been able to navigate some experiences that other people might just say, okay, I give up, right? Like I can't do this, or this is too hard. And for you, it did the opposite. It motivated you, it inspired you, it kept you going. What, tell me about that, about grit for you.
Well, I think because it twofold. A lot of things came easy to me, and then certain things didn't.
Okay.
Right. And so I had learned early on, if I just keep practicing at something, I'll use soccer as an example. Like if I practice, the footwork or the juggling at a certain point, I can increase my reps. So I would just obsessively work on it until I got to a certain place. And then that would end up leading to me advancing in teams. Well, I took that same sort of scenario where it wasn't like, I didn't start off getting the leads of all the plays.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. If any, I was chorus. The irony is I remember having someone, who went on and became a big Broadway star, and I hanging out and him saying, like, talking about a play, and he's like, "Oh, well, you'd be the chorus." And the irony is I know I'm still a professional actor and he's not. So like it is a funny thing because I didn't assume that everything needed to be handed to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw the people that, whether their parents were helping them get the part or, kind of really support. I don't think support is bad. I think enabling is.
Mm,
And I think like this idea that we don't want our kids to have hardship really is a disservice. Back in the day when immigrants would come to our country, I mean, this still is true, but, back when you think back in like, when the Irish were coming over and, everyone was coming over, like there were no support systems. Like you don't work hard, you don't eat, right?
right.
You don't, there was no systems in place to help you. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be systems in place because obviously I have a nonprofit that helps formerly homeless moms, right? So I'm not saying that, but I think out of sheer will, when someone has to figure it out, you figure it out. And I've said to people, especially like actors who sometimes like go on unemployment in between jobs, I'm like, what you're doing is you're dulling the reality that you're not where you need to be. Or when I've had people say, like, I'm going to go on FICOR as an actor, because I financially can't afford blah, blah, blah. And so now I'm going to basically do non-union work when I'm a union actor. And I've said, well, first of all, you're now lessening the rate for everybody. But if you can't compete in that league, then you need to just get better so you can.
Right.
99% of actors would say they need FICOR. So, and you're just not even making that much money. So then the real thing is like, instead of taking the easier route, why not take the route where you have to work harder to become better? And so because I had no training, like I look back and it was just instinct. So I'm like, okay, I'll learn how to, read the script and do it. And I was very intuitive about it and really great at it. And then I got really heady about it. So I had to train even more. And certain teachers and techniques, as you know, as a performer, like can make you more heady and you're not as in your body. So then I had to kind of learn the technique to then learn how to get it in my body to get my 10,000 hours to where then I knew how to take if someone throws me an audition or shows me something on set, for the most part, I know what I need to do. Or if I don't, I know someone who knows who can help me.
Yeah.
And I think that grit is can be cultivated, but I think when parents prevent their kids from failing and not see failure as an opportunity, right? Like I hear that a lot, like, oh, I hope they get into the sorority because it's like I'm sorry, like that's a big deal. Like that's not a big deal. And if they don't, then they're not going to be a social, they're not going to be lonely for the rest of their lives. They'll like find their own group. Like there's a lack of faith in like, well, if this thing isn't meant for you, then either this isn't your path, or what can you do so that you're ready for it the next opportunity. And I think that, we have this idea that everything should be easier, and it's just not. And I think when we let that go, that's really helpful. I remember listening to the woman who created Spanx. One of the things that her father would say at the dinner table
Sarah
was,
Blakely.
yes, Sarah
Yeah,
Blakely,
she's amazing.
was, how have you failed today?
Mm,
Right? How have you failed today? Not meaning like go be a dummy and go fail on purpose, but like, how have you taken a risk? How have you expanded yourself? How did you go beyond your comfort zone? And I think grit is the idea of like falling down, but you get back up. You fall down, you get back up. I mean, it really is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're like, okay, that didn't work. What can I do now? And I had to, because I had to pay my bills. I was
yeah,
like, I wasn't gonna like be one of those people who just lived in insurmountable debt. I know people who do that and have done that, and that didn't serve them. But and even when I did get into a financial situation where I was in $500,000 worth of debt from a real estate situation, where I was uh where I was conned right before the real estate crisis, and suddenly I had a property on my hands that was like a huge gorilla on my back, and suddenly the value of the property rapidly diminished. I was like, what do I do? I was like, I didn't want to declare bankruptcy. I suddenly, owed tons of money. I wasn't on a show. I mean, I didn't owe tons of money. I had tons of money that was in, mortgage payments. I didn't realize that it had been a scam. I had the FBI talk to me. I literally had to go to the FBI office to find out if I was in on the scam. And so I remember
wow.
spending months putting together a document of like all the things to show that like I was trying in good faith to pay everything and to do all that. But that actually led to, as horrible as it was, me thinking I was making a smart business decision, which led to years of headache. It actually forced me to like go to investment seminars, start to like learn about investing, learning about money. I learned how to be a better businesswoman. So in a way, it was kind of getting my master's degree
Yeah,
unofficially in a lot of business and money, because I had to learn, how in the world did I get myself in this, and how do I get myself out so I never am in a situation like this again, where I'm never ignorant to a con artist.
right.
So like I said, there were like, in my 20s, it felt like landmine, landmine, landmine. I was put on disability for hurting my back because I was told I would never run again,
Wow.
from injuring myself at 19, 6 months after I moved out to Los Angeles, officially moved, and was in massive pain and having to learn about that. But that forced me to learn about alternative medicine. That forced me to heal my back. And, I'm so grateful, because now when I've had an injury or whatnot, I'm not, I don't accept it as like, well, it's just aging and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm like, no, there's something I can do. There's always a way. And
Right.
so I really do think that if we look at hardship, and, again, I think faith plays a part in this, that there's a reason for the hardship. And we learn things often more when things are hard than when things are easy. And
Right.
so the goal is, can I learn the lessons when they're easier and I'm getting like little red flags, not
Yeah.
blaring, the house is burning down, I might have to declare bankruptcy, my
Yeah.
marriage, what can I do to pay attention and to use that as an opportunity for wherever my path is meant to go.
Yeah. I love that so much because um, that's how I feel, in my life. Like I know looking back, I mean, in the moment when the shit's hitting the fan, it's like, really? Why is this happening? But inevitably, it has served my greater purpose. And I get to be of service to people because I have gone through whatever it is that I've gone through. And it sounds like that's exactly your mindset and your feelings about that. If your parents would have not been like sink or swim, perhaps you wouldn't have developed the grit that you needed to be able to sustain a 20 plus year career as a working actress. I mean, you said it yourself, 2% of actors are able to make a living in their craft. You have done that for 20 plus years. So inevitably and ultimately it has served you, right? Having that like belief that you, no matter what, no matter if you have the support of others or not, you have within you what it takes to be able to weather the storm and then get to the other side and then find the gift in the lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
part of the reason why I call the book Manifesting Your Mission, the book that I have on right there, instead of Manifest Your Mission, is I think it's ongoing. It
Yeah,
never ends, right?
right.
Until we take our last breath, our legacy is ongoing, and we get each day is a new day for us to begin again. And I think I'm not saying parents just be like, bye, I do think, support is important, but it's a fine line between
Yes,
support and enabling. And I
I
think
agree.
we have a culture that enables a lot of dysfunction and a lot of victimhood and a lot of laziness. And you look at other cultures and they don't do that. And so, I think we are in a way taking away some of the pride that children can have in doing things themselves, in learning how to be like, yeah, you didn't make that team. That's awful. Okay, what can we do next? How can we figure it out? And that is a lesson that they can take forever
Absolutely.
onto the next thing. Instead of, oh, I'm going to call them and I'm going to make sure that they get you on the team. It's like, well, then you're not serving the lesson. Like,
Right.
let them grieve it, and so that you can teach them how to grieve, because that's a lost art in our culture for a lot of people, like how to grieve and grieve in a healthy way, not in a dysfunctional way. And then after that, let me come up with a plan of action. And even if that plan of action fails over and over and over again, I mean, if you think about how the light bulb was invented, he didn't figure it out the third try.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so if that's what your gut, your desire to wants to get better at, then I think it's listening to that. And I do think that because early on I had that God moment, I had that real intuitive whoa. And there were other things that I had that felt very God moments. And then it was, whoa, this is very scary for me. I don't like this. I'm feeling a lot of negative energy. I'm feeling a lot of, I didn't know how to handle it when I was really young. It wasn't until I was later that I was like, okay, let me kind of tap into that. And like you, I'm a Reiki practitioner. So I understand energy in a different way now. And I wish I would have had someone be like, let me explain. You're
Right.
really open to some of this stuff, or let me explain what some of this is more. I mean, that would have been great. But I do think that we can find a lot of mentorship through books. We can find a lot of mentorship. Obviously, like a podcast is a great way to like have a broad stroke of something and then realize, okay, let me do a deeper dive on that. And
Right.
I found that for me, whenever there's something that I'm working on and I'm struggling in an area, like for example, when I had the real estate crisis and I needed to learn about money like yesterday,
Uh-huh.
I I obsessively took seminars on money. And by the way, I didn't have a lot. So like it was very
Right.
much like this little bit of money I'm going to put into this, but I took it very seriously because I had to. The circumstances were dire. And then reading as many money books as I possibly could and seeing what was similar and seeing what I needed to do differently so that I could understand how in the world could I have gotten myself into this situation? How do I prevent myself from ever getting into a situation like this again? Like, what don't I know that led me to be fooled? And I take, there were other people that were involved that were much more savvy and successful at that time that also got swindled, but regardless, we all did. And so,
Right.
I think that these are all things that are opportunities for us if we choose to reframe it. And there's a section in my book called Silver Linings, which, it's like, what's the silver lining of this? But I do think taking time to look back you know, really look at a situation honestly and saying, all right, this was the lesson from this. And now I know this moving forward. And I'm so grateful because I wouldn't have had this if this didn't happen, especially like in relationships and all of the heartbreaks we have personally and
Yeah.
professionally. But it's a practice.
You said God, you had a God moment.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you because, I got in the entertainment industry when I was 10 years old. That's how old I was when I got my first agent. And I, worked as a child, and I did not have a strong sense of self or a strong connection to a faith. And I think it would have definitely served me better to be able to navigate the ups and downs. Tell me, how has your faith and your connection to God, universe, source, or, things that seem like they should work out and they don't work out, like, how has that helped you been able to stay successful for 20 plus years in a really, in an industry where there's constant rejection, right? There's constant like having to pull yourself up out of the place of rejection, making that mean something about yourself. Like, how have you been able to hold on to your sense of self and your faith and your belief in yourself in this industry?
Right. Well, let me just start with the rejection thing, because I think this is something that for people that aren't used to rejection, or they're like, I didn't, I got fired. I'm like, I get fired all the time. This means the job ends, or I've been fired, or whatever this is. And
Right.
it sucks. I'm not belittling it, but I think the idea of rejection seems scary. And, I like to say it's all about being comfortable, being uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? Like, okay, I didn't get that. That sucked. But then in retrospect, you look back and you say, oh, well, if I would have kept that job, then I wouldn't have met my husband. And you're like, okay, so maybe there was something that was part of that I don't understand. Or what could I have done differently? All right, now let me discard the rest. So I'm not like beating myself up or going into some comparison, online looking like who booked that job and they're better hair than me or whatever nonsense, right? Like I didn't have time to think about those things. Like, it's like, no,
Right.
I gotta keep going
Next.
on to the next, on to the
Yeah.
next. And so I think this idea that rejection is bad is just it's just false, right? Like, I'm not a farmer who if the weather turns bad, my crops are gone and now we're all starving, right? Like it's just it's the stakes are high, but they're not like high for real, right? So I think that it's putting it all kind of in perspective of like I get to do something that a lot of people don't get to do professionally. And how do I just run it and have fun with it and learn along the way? Um, and not take rejection so seriously, right?
Yeah.
And then what you're saying about faith, my faith has gone on a real evolutionary journey. Like I was raised Catholic. I knew early on because oddly my dad didn't want to go to mass anymore, but my mom had converted for him. And then she's like, well, why am I taking the kids there? And I was told that the devil would get me if I ever sinned when I was in Sunday school. And so I was like, well, no, the devil's not going to get you, And so then I saw different versions of Christianity. Now, again, in Minnesota, where I was from, there was not a lot of religions or not a lot of variation. I just saw a lot of Christian. And I knew one person who was half Catholic, half Jewish, right? Like, but in the getting to see the Baptist or the Lutheran or whatever it was, I realized they all thought they were right and they all were pretty much the same. But then they would all kind of say that theirs was different than the others. And I just remember being young thinking, it doesn't really make sense. So then later, when I needed to be confirmed Catholic, I told my aunt and my dad, I don't believe this. Like, I just don't believe it. And, it was one of those like everyone's been confirmed Catholic, you have to, blah, blah, blah. So I did the thing. But then I quickly then joined like a youth group. And I think through singing, I really felt spirit.
Mm.
I felt a real connection to spirit with that. And then later in high school, I was in a youth group, and in their youth group, and I was a youth leader. And we went on like these tours during during spring break when like everyone else is like, we're going to Cancun, getting wasted and hooking up, and I'm like, I'm gonna sing about Jesus, like that's what I'm doing. And it was awesome. It was like 300 kids and it was a lot of fun. And I actually had another kind of God moment in that, which felt really interesting. But then when I came to Los Angeles, I I thought it was amazing that there were so many different religions, there were so many different cultures. But I also kind of saw how there were some that were a little crazy, right? Like I saw the Scientology and I was like, this is crazy, and I saw certain things where I'm like, I don't agree with that. And so I kind of became lost as to what I believed because I didn't have an anchor for it. And I also, I had a hard time with some of the human ego judgment on it being put onto some of the Christian stuff, like, oh, he's gay, well, he's going to go to hell. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Then you're going to hell and I'm going to hell too because he's an amazing person. So that was that was hard to reckon with. And then I kind of geared a little bit more spiritual. And some of that also felt like, just make up your own religion and anything kind of can go. And I think that it's like anything's acceptable if it feels good. And it's like, well, that can lead to all sorts of craziness. So, depending on what group of people that you're hanging out with. And I think there was a place that I really felt drawn to, but then later found out that the reverend like cheated on his wife. And I was just like, I can't, I just, you're not even like living what you are preaching. You're not, that is not, yes, you're a human, but you didn't fall on her. So like, I can't get her pregnant. Like I can't while married. So I was like,
Oh dear.
I can't like wrap my head around this nonsense. And so through all of those things, I think there have been moments where I learned how to really trust my intuition. And when I would pray to God, I would get signs. Or, like after my dad passed, I read a book about it being a spiritual thing, losing a parent, a spiritual journey, I believe is the name of the book. And paying attention to signs. I got a lot of signs after my dad left. They were really subtle. And I was like, oh, interesting. And so when I would choose to be open and see that everything's all really available if I slow down, if I listen. And part of the thing I have in my book as well is learning how to tap into that intuitiveness. And so much of how I go about my day is informed by intuitive hits, whether it's something simple like you better go to the bathroom now, and I don't listen to it. I'm like dying going to the bathroom. Like I should have listened to that like thing to, oh, I want to do a show. I want to do a show about this, and I start to write it down. And so I keep notes on it. And it's like, okay. And some of those ideas I'm not meant to give birth to. And then other ones I feel the energy and desire to be like, okay, I'm going to give birth to this. Like right now, prior to recording this, I had our first recording or rehearsal for a benefit that I'm going to put on for the New Hollywood. And I was like, all right, because I miss singing and I miss performing and I haven't
Oh
done it
yeah.
in a minute. And so I was like, all right, yeah, we're going to do that. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to direct it. And these are the closing and the ending numbers. I know what this is going to be. I have a bunch of different options, and I'm using a bunch of ladies in the group. And then I have a bunch of like Broadway people that, we are going to fill in as needed. And it's like, ooh, I'm birthing this little thing and it's messy right now, but I trust that I'll know or someone will say something and I'll hear it.
Yeah.
So I feel like the creative process, the faith process, it's kind of when I slow down and I listen, I'm led.
Yeah.
I think Reiki, like, because I know you do Reiki as well. You realize like, oh, we can all tap into a lot more if we just choose to get out of our computer that thinks it knows everything, our brain.
Yeah. I think what you just shared, it it resonates with me deeply. I was raised Catholic and I had to navigate that and figure out what made sense to me. And very much like what you're saying, I have arrived at a place where my faith really does come through, like through me, where I'll feel something, I'll feel called to something, or I'll get an idea and then I'll get signs or I'll just feel led. And that's where my faith comes from. It feels more of like an internal rather than an external, even though the signs might come from, an external source or place, it's coming through me. So I love that you also have that experience. And
Yeah.
I really do think it's funny. I was out of the business for many, many years. And then I decided to write and perform a one woman show. And just like a couple of weeks ago, I ended up signing with an agent. This is a totally crazy, I wasn't looking for it. Like I met a mom who she's a mom of a new kid at my daughter's school, and she's a dancer and I'm a dancer. And anyway, next thing I know, I'm like signing with an agent and I'm back in. I'm like, okay, I'm almost 50 years old. I'm like, I guess I'm back in. We'll see what's going to happen. But but I'm kind of excited because if I would have had the faith that I have now when I was younger, a younger person navigating the industry, I feel like it would have been a completely different experience.
Yeah. And I think also, being a mom, being a parent, you just look
Yes,
at life a lot differently. Your
totally. Yeah.
purpose is a lot less about ego, I think.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
ironically, I feel more drawn to Christianity now than I had prior,
Mm,
which is interesting as a kid, and also elements of it, right? Like, and then, but I ironically also my my husband's Jewish. So like I'm like, but I see the value in, so many of these beautiful religions that of course are flawed because humans are flawed. Um, but they have practices that teach you either how to be a good person or how to help one another, or how to support or how to grieve. And I think a lot of those things can be lost. And yet I think there's a lot of necessity in a lot of it. And then if it's hard to decipher, like, and then that's crazy, right? Like, you see like people that are radicals and Afghanistan, women are not allowed to speak out loud in public. So it's like things can clearly go, a different direction in certain people's hands. So I think that, religion is, I do think it's important to have something that you believe in that's bigger than you. Because if you don't, you're going to feel really lost and scared when life isn't going your way. And I look back with so much gratitude for all the times I thought I wanted it to be one way. And then God was like, you don't even know what you need.
Mm,
And then this is what you need. Like I
I
say
love
to
that.
people because I've actually helped a handful of people like find their person through changing some things energetically. And then also, whatever. And
Can you help me?
yeah, it's funny. It's funny because I do think it's a real energetic thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all things. And, just learning a couple different techniques. And obviously every relationship is a journey for growth and discovery
Oh
and
yeah.
reflection of self. But um anyway, I think that, a lot of people I've met who have been like, oh, there's no good men, or there's no this, or there's no that, or this is what I like, and I don't like this, and da da da. And I'm like, stop, stop, stop. If you knew what was right for you, you'd be with them already. So how
Mm,
about you go about it from the stance that you know nothing?
hmm.
I mean, it's one thing if you're like, they're abusive. No, but some of these silly standards of like, he can't be balding or something just so so silly and is a protection mechanism because you don't want to get hurt.
Right.
And instead staying open that maybe it won't look a certain way or sound a certain way immediately, but that could be the biggest love affair of your life.
Yeah.
Because I think when we get our heart broken, we figure out ways to protect ourselves and come up with like, well, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah. Everything that you're talking about, it's like finding that the balance between having a vision,
Yeah.
right? Like trusting your vision and also being completely detached from like how it's going to all unfold or even like what it's going to look like. Like being present to wow, like what how could this unfold? And if it doesn't unfold the way that you think that you want it to, you have this you have this like sparkle in your eye where you're like, ooh, maybe it's something so much better because that's happened before in my life. So I'm not even going to let that get to me because I'm going to trust that it might possibly be something that I haven't even considered.
Well, and I think because I learned to trust myself,
Yeah, that's
right? I think
huge.
a lot of people, when I see people that are really struggling, especially with some of the women that are like in my nonprofit that are, they really either had really bad circumstances thrown at them with a lot of trauma or made bad decisions or both, that they've betrayed themselves over and over and over again. And at the beginning is your word and following through with your word. And when we follow through with our word with just the simplest of things, then we build confidence. Then we can say, no, if I say I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to oversay what I can do and then beat myself up, right? And that will help me have self-esteem. And the more self-esteem I have, then I can go take bigger risks. But if we're constantly, failing ourselves, then we're never leaving that first step. We can never go and climb up that mountain because we often, the thing that I've found, are the most angry at for other people hurting us is how we have perhaps allowed or enabled it. Not all, but I do think that that's the biggest betrayal, is betrayal of self. And so to be able to forgive that and then say, okay, but today I'm going to work on a new habit. Today, I mean, it goes back to like the four agreements, right? But be impeccable with your word and he has
Don't take anything personally.
all day
That's
personally.
helpful.
All of them are good, but
Yeah.
specifically like being impeccable with your words so that you can then take steps to move forward, to move forward, to move forward. And again, because I didn't have formal training for any of it.
Mhm.
And I think because I wasn't locked into a box of like, well, now I need to do this and this and this and this, and then I can do that. And I've said to a lot of people, there's like this idea, like if you want to write, you're like, well, I need to have gotten my master's in writing, or I need to blah, 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 blah. And I go, no, 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 no. I mean, all of that's great. I'm not saying don't do that if that's what you're called to do, but that doesn't mean you can't write.
Mhm.
You don't need to be knighted to write. You don't need some like, queen to say, oh, now you are officially a writer, go write, after you've studied for 25 years. That can work too, but it doesn't have to be. You can still write along the way and then get better and better as you figure things out, and hopefully fast track with a coach, or fast track with a class, or fast track by, reading up on the topic so you're not just spinning your wheels.
Yeah. I love that. I wrote a book and it came out this year, and it's all about moving out of self-abandonment and no
Yeah.
longer betraying myself
Yeah.
and learning how to trust myself and keeping my word to myself. I think that's so huge. I would love to hear more about your nonprofit and how did you come up with that idea? How was it born? Tell me more about it. I think it's so beautiful that you're supporting and
Thank
mentoring other women.
Yeah. Well, originally the nonprofit, I mean, it's been around for 20 years almost. So in 2006. So it started with a goal setting group. I got a 501c3 nonprofit so we could do different charitable events and give back in different ways. And like I've put on different mentorship events, I've put on different benefits, I've put on, like I said, things to help stop human trafficking or the environment or whatnot. We come up with different things at different points. And then, the group itself people became so successful. It was kind of like, well, where's that money going? And it's like, well, no, 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 these are separate things. So I divided it up. And so the Mastermind Accountability Group is actually under my coaching business now, under Manifesting Your Mission. And the nonprofit itself has still stayed, but it's the main program that we're working on. I mean, we've had fiscal sponsorship programs, we had mentorship programs, but this one I specifically wanted to help women who I felt needed it the most. We originally started with foster youth, but a lot of them didn't realize how deep in a hole they were. And also the system within the foster care system, like they leave after a certain amount of time, and it just wasn't the right fit for the goal setting and the focus that was required, right? And whereas Harvest Home, which we're officially the alumni program for, these are women who, they've gone through a shelter, they had their kid, they were homeless, and then it's taking it, okay, now they have a job, but it's like, how do you, when you've had, for many of them, I mean, all of them, such severe trauma and heartbreak, then take that and then go from not just being a level above, right? How do you then say, now let me actualize my dreams? And so my children don't have this same cycle, right? Or the goal is getting out of the system altogether, right? Like, and wanting to help people that really want to help themselves. That's the thing that I really wanted to work on and work with, because you're not going to do a goal setting book and do accountability and all of the things. It's called Teenage Accountability Program, right? Like, and there's prizes and things like that we include to incentivize and to motivate and just to really to make it fun. But at the end of the day, it's, all right, we're going to learn about boundaries. We're going to learn about speaking up. We're going to have accountability. We're going to have spot coaching. We're also going to have, you're going to need to read about certain books about certain subjects. And it's not light and fluffy, right? It's like, because getting out of massive debt is not light and fluffy. It is a focused major endeavor. And it really should be criminal for what these credit card companies allow. So many of these women have astronomical debt where it's like modern day slavery. Like, they'll never get out of it if you don't know how to do it properly, and because they weren't taught how to handle their money, and their parents are in massive debt or just constantly living off the system. And so, it's taking just, realizing like, yes, that's all hard, but getting yourself into a place where you can take care of yourself is way harder. And then it's just about learning habits.
Yeah.
Let's just learn new habits. Let's get comfortable being uncomfortable, and let's just keep growing slowly, slowly, slowly with people who say, I got you, I support you, I see you, but I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And like, let's keep going. So since I had created that within my peer group with artists, entrepreneurs, and change makers since 2006, I took a similar model. I shifted some of it because it needs more attention. People need a little bit more specific attention.
Yeah.
And I have multiple facilitators that help. And I set it up in a way that makes sense also for them because they're single moms. They can't go and meet up once a month. It's just with childcare and work. And it's just, they're not. So I set it up in a Zoom situation when their kids are asleep. And, we made it make sense and bring in speakers that are really relative to what it is that they're working on. Like, how do you get your kid in a better school so your kid doesn't get susceptible, get drawn into gangs. So we had someone come in and talk about, okay, here's how you do the magnet system and the charter system, which for those who are in California and LA specifically, it's like a Rubik's Cube. You're like, what do I need to do to try and get into a school that doesn't suck? Because most of the schools suck here, right? Even though we pay really high taxes. Like, it's like, okay, so if your school sucks, this is what you can do. Here's how you can play the lottery. Here's how you can get into these schools so that your kid gets a better chance. And they're like, oh, okay, that's what I do. Or, these are the housing situations that you can go into. Or here's how you can, up level your resume and your LinkedIn so that when a recruiter looks at your stuff, they want to pass it along. We just had a woman who's a recruiter kind of talk about tips and tricks within that, so they can say, oh, if I use these search words, if I do this and this and this, then it will make more sense. And just things that ideally our parents teach us if they're really business savvy, but if they don't know, it's something that they can say, oh, this is how I can get ahead or not take it personally again if I don't get getting rejected, right? Where it's like, well, your resume may suck. You may not be curating your resume to that job, and that's why
Right.
you're not getting to the next level.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, that level of support is such a huge gift.
Yeah.
And you're also holding them accountable. So it's like offering the support like we were talking about earlier, giving them the support and also holding them accountable so that they can build the confidence and have the self-esteem from knowing that they are capable
Yeah.
with love and with support.
Yeah.
You have so many things going on. What are you the most excited about?
Well, I mean, as we're recording this, I'm in season 4 of Outer Banks, which is on Netflix. So that airs tonight. Part of
Woo!
it drops tonight, and then the other half drops in November. So that's exciting. So it's been fun to do like a bunch of acting work this year. And then I've been really diving into my nonprofit. Like we just did our fundraising walk, March for Mamas. We raised 20 grand, which was our goal as a
Wow.
grassroots organization. So like we're like, yay, we did it. And then we're going to be doing some fundraising salons as well as the benefit next year, which will be really fun
Yes,
to get,
I want to hear all about that. That sounds amazing.
you know, just to get like to use all these ladies' talents and energy. I mean, I have women in my organization who have been on Broadway, who are Broadway choreographers, who, professional dancers or singers or have taken either a break from it or they focused on another thing or they're moms now. So to get to be like, all right, we're gonna get some of you, dust off some cobwebs, get you back up there, and then bring in some people who they don't have any cobwebs, they've just been doing it alongside. And I just am a creative. I love to create. I love to do something with purpose. I love to be around people that I think are inspiring and positive. And it's no coincidence that I've created a community of women that I feel are really supportive and loving and all the things, considering what almost was my demise was the opposite.
Isn't that amazing? I
Yeah.
think we all have our own experiences of a sister wound or right like negative experiences with other girls or women. And so yeah, to get to this place in our lives where we have relationships with women where it's all about helping each other rise into all of who we were born to be, and really like seeing each other and honoring that. And yeah, that's the place that I'm in my life right now, and it feels really, really good. And that's what you're creating, right, in your communities as well. So I think that's incredible.
And I think we all have amazing God-given, universe-given, however you want to view it, gifts that if we just get out of our own way and just play with them and just
Mm,
try, or even if it's going back to something that you used to love to do. I mean, I know you still dance, but like if that's something that you used to love to do and you haven't done it forever, it's like a part of you that needs to be reawakened. And I know I'm sure you see
absolutely.
that all the time. And
Absolutely.
and to give ourselves permission to dream. And I know it's hard, especially with little kids where you're just drained. Um, and I would be lying if I say I do all of this all by myself. I don't. I delegate out a lot. That's the only way I can do all that I do. And be like a present mom or,
Right.
and a present wife. So, um, but I think that when we decide like these nudges of interest are part of what our path is, and it doesn't mean that we need to create world peace. It could just mean that we can be better at baking and create joy that way, or whatever it is, and just cherishing and honoring that, then we're just more fulfilled in our journey.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the first questions that I ask when I'm doing coaching with women. I say, what is something that you loved to do as a young girl? Because I think exactly what you said. It might feel unrelated to the issue that they're, experiencing, but it's because we need to wake up that part of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That we have abandoned for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, and so I love that. I love that. I I have, oh God, this gal that I was coaching, she came to me and she had been a dancer in her life. And I was like, okay, if you've been a dancer in your life, you have to be dancing in some capacity. I don't care if it's, down the street at a local studio or just in your living room putting music on. If that's a part of you, you have to do it. And so fast forward, I got a message from her like a couple weeks ago. She's dancing like 3 days a week. She's joined like this performance group at the studio that she's dancing at. She's like, oh my God, I feel so alive. I feel so happy. I'm like, yes, that's what it is, right? We are here to feel alive. We are here to experience our gifts, our God given talent, our God given gifts. Um, Sometimes for no other reason than just to feel alive and to feel joy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I also have to say, it's also completely normal to feel inside out and lose track of that when you are in caretaking for young kids and
Absolutely.
giving ourselves that grace.
Absolutely.
I wish more women really helped nurture one another through that. Like, yes, you may not see through this, see through what you're dealing with because you're just having all your energy sucked to keeping this human alive
Right.
or keeping your family together. But there will come a time when they're in school, you have a
Yeah.
little bit more time.
Yeah.
And then once you learn how to manage that and they're not getting sick every 5 seconds,
Right.
like you'll be you're sick every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That then yes, it's important to make it a budget priority and a time priority for those things, even if it's just a little bit. I've seen people who are very sick start to get better just by going and doing some of the things that like they were not allowing themselves to do. And again, part of it was out of necessity. Small kids, super stressful. We've gone through a pandemic, for those in the entertainment industry, there's been a strike. And to let ourselves have a lot of grace around these are traumatic, stressful situations. No, it's not the Great Depression. No, we're not in a world war here. It could be way worse, but giving ourselves some grace, like it's been some funky times and it's some funky energy out there. So how do I give myself some grace and then also like slowly plan, not that I need to go be a professional dancer in a competitive group, but maybe you take that one class and who knows, it may lead to that in 5 years or whatever.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know. Leave room for for possibilities that you might not be considering.
Yeah.
Oh, so where can people find you and how can they work with you if they are
Yeah.
feeling called to?
Yeah. Well, you can find me on my website. BriannaBrownKeen.com is my big overarching website. And then for Manifesting Your Mission, it's manifestingyourmission.org. That has everything about my book. I do private coaching as well, some small group. I've done retreats as well, which is really fun. And then my nonprofit is thenewhollywood.org. And that has all the, videos and the testimonials and whatnot from the ladies. So it's just fun to feel fulfilled and doing things that I love and all that. You also can find me on all the social platforms. It's at Brianna Brown Keen. On X, it's at Brown Brianna, which is weird, but we're going with it. And then YouTube as well. So and that has my podcast as well. And my podcast is Manifesting Your Mission with Brianna Brown Keen, and it's on all the things.
All the things. And they can tune in and watch you on Outer Banks
Yep.
tonight. So good to be with you. You're such an inspiration. You really are. I think of people who will be listening to this and just what an example you are and what an expander you are, right? Like, I think it's so important for everyone to have people that we look to that show us what is possible. And you came from, you came from Minnesota with, really challenging circumstances and parents who were like, okay, go to LA and good luck. And here you are, like this amazing embodied woman. You've had an amazing career. You continue to have an amazing career, and you're creating platforms to support other people. And you're continuing to say yes to the call of your soul with this new benefit that you're doing. Like, I'm so inspired and impressed and in awe and grateful. I'm grateful because I know I feel like I get to be that for a lot of women. And I need other women that I can look to and go, okay, like if she can do it, I can keep doing it and I can keep saying yes. So it's such a gift, right? That you have had the courage and continue to have the courage to say yes, to be all of who you were born to be, so that other people could look at you and go, okay, if Brianna can do this, then maybe I can too.
Well, and just to add to that, thank you, first of all. But secondly, because I created a support system where it was okay to fail and it was okay to be celebrated, that has given me strength to try things that were outside of my comfort zone, because it was, when I first was writing a book or first doing a podcast, I was like, oh, I'm not good with technology or whatever.
Me too.
Blah, 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 blah. Like, you go to all of the stories, right?
Right.
Even though
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm competent, I'm a smart person, like I can figure it out, right? But
Yeah.
you go into all of the resistance and you find out, like with my podcast, it was so funny. I'm like, instead of doing the technological stuff, I'm like, I need to make sure the backdrop, the color is the right. I need to make sure it's the right color. That's the most important thing. I'm like, I think maybe knowing how to do the technology is the most important part. But I was like, well, it's resistance. I'm playing with it. I'm still like knocking things off the list. This is just not the most important. But because I had that, I could say to someone, I don't know how to write a book. Will you help me? And they're like, oh yeah, because they've written books. They're an author that was in the group. Or, okay, she's done a podcast, and I interviewed a bunch of people who had podcasts. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And then I got a coach so I can like just hold me accountable to doing it, so I didn't not have it be on my list. And so I like to say, you want to have a tribe of people who give you gentle puppy nudges, like keep going.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need like the book that I'm reading right now, which is so funny. It's so masculine. Rhodes, our friend, in common. She's like, I think the ladies need to read Extreme Ownership. And I had seen some stuff about it, and I thought, no, that one's the wrong tone. But I love it because it's like Navy SEALs, and she's like, everything in your life you take extreme ownership for, and they're talking about military and battle, and I love it. It's great. But I was like, not everyone's ready. Some people need a little more like gentle nudging. But having a place of support and having a coach, having a community to just help you it is the reason I have been able to be a multi-hyphenate and not get lost in in a town that can be just so filled, like I've mentioned, with dysfunction and noise.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Find your tribe, find your sources of support, find your coaches and your mentors. Absolutely. Absolutely. And say yes before you have it all figured out. I started my podcast before I had it all figured out. I'm still figuring it out, right? Like you can say yes before you have it all figured out. Like, no, we don't need to be perfect. We don't have to, have it all figured out. Just say yes to the next thing that you're being called to.
yeah.
Right? Oh, amazing, amazing. All right. Well, on that note, I have to go to my daughter's parent teacher conference. So
Have fun. Go. I hope
yes.
their grades are great.
Thank you so much, Brianna. It was such a pleasure to be with you.
So
And
fun.
thank you, friends, for being with us. And until next time, say yes, say yes, say yes. Find your support and find people like Brianna who are examples of what is possible.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, friend. Bye.
Bye. Mm.